I've been thinking a lot lately about how the people we meet, the ones who move us, irritate us, inspire us, or make us feel small, are rarely just random characters in our story. They're mirrors. Not always flattering ones, not always easy to face. But they reflect back to us the parts of ourselves we've lost, hidden, or never dared to own. I used to believe that when someone triggered me, it meant something was wrong with them. I'd say things like, "They're so full of themselves," or "Why are they always trying to control everything?" But over time, especially after some painful relationships and a lot of quiet nights spent overthinking, I began to realize those reactions had more to do with me than with them. The truth hit me hard one day. I was venting about a coworker, confident, outspoken, a little flashy. She always had the loudest laugh in the room and wasn't afraid to take up space. I couldn't stand her. I thought she was arrogant, always showing off. But in a moment of raw honesty, I asked myself, what if I'm not mad at her, but at the part of me that wants to be seen like that and doesn't know how? That question opened a door I had been avoiding for years. See, I grew up learning to be quiet. Good girl, small voice, don't take up too much space. Confidence in my world looked like arrogance, and arrogance was dangerous. It meant rejection, judgment, or being too much. So I learned to suppress that side of me, to be liked instead of real. But when I saw someone owning the very things I had buried in myself, it felt like a slap in the face. I wasn't just irritated, I was jealous of their freedom. And that jealousy didn't make me a bad person, it made me human. It made me someone with a shadow, not in the spooky villainous sense, but in the deeply psychological sense that Carl Jung talked about. Our shadow isn't just the bad stuff, it's the unclaimed potential, the parts of us we've pushed into hiding because they weren't safe or accepted. It's humbling to admit that the people I resented most were often the ones carrying pieces of my own soul I wasn't brave enough to embody yet. I judged what I couldn't express. I envied what I denied in myself. And that realization, it stings, but it's also freeing, because once you see it, really see it, you can start using your emotional reactions as a compass, not a curse. You can trace your triggers back to the parts of yourself that need healing, attention, or even celebration. Take admiration, for example. When you deeply admire someone, what exactly are you admiring? Is it their creativity, their strength, their ability to speak truthfully? Whatever it is, ask yourself, is that something I secretly long to embody? Chances are, yes, and it's not because they have something you don't. It's because you recognize it. It's already inside you, waiting to be claimed. The same goes for the people who irritate you. Not in every case, of course. Sometimes people are just incompatible with your values, but often the traits that make your blood boil are the ones you've rejected in yourself. I remember being around someone who cried easily, wore their heart on their sleeve, and talked about their feelings openly. It drove me crazy. I thought they were overdramatic, but later I realized I wasn't annoyed by them. I was uncomfortable with my own vulnerability. I was taught to keep it together, to not show weakness. Watching them express what I'd been trained to hide made me feel exposed. It's strange, right? The qualities we suppress become the ones we react to the most. That's why relationships, all kinds, not just romantic, are such powerful teachers. Every close connection is like a flashlight, shining into the hidden corners of your psyche. They illuminate your wounds, your unmet needs, your unlived dreams. And yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but it's also a gift. When I started paying attention to my emotional responses with curiosity instead of judgment, everything shifted. Instead of saying, "I can't stand that person," I'd ask, "What are they showing me about myself?" That one question softened me. It made me more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward myself. I stopped seeing my reactions as flaws. I started seeing them as invitations. And that's what I want to share with you today. If someone is rubbing you the wrong way, before writing them off, pause and reflect. Is there something about them that's holding up a mirror? Is there a part of you that's trying to speak through envy, through anger, through resistance? Don't ignore that voice. That voice is your shadow, and your shadow doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to come home. I'm still learning how to welcome those parts, still fumbling through moments of discomfort, judgment, and shame. But I've come to believe that the more I accept the reflection in the mirror, no matter how distorted it first appears, the more whole I become. And maybe that's the real point. We're not here to fix ourselves or become perfect. We're here to reclaim all the pieces we left behind, piece by piece, reaction by reaction. Until one day we look in the mirror, not with criticism, but with recognition, and maybe even love. You know what's wild? How much of ourselves we throw away just to feel safe. I don't think we even realize we're doing it most of the time. It starts early. We pick up on what's acceptable and what's too much, what gets us love and what gets us silence or shame. And so, little by little, we cut off the parts that don't fit the script. For me, it was anger. I learned real quick that being angry made me difficult, so I pushed it down, swallowed it, smiled instead. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that anger could be sacred, a boundary, a fire, a voice that says, "This isn't okay." But the truth is, everything we exile from ourselves doesn't disappear. It waits. And if we don't face it consciously, it finds other ways to get our attention. That's what I've come to understand about emotional sabotage in relationships. Those weird moments where things start to feel too good, too real, and we suddenly pick a fight, withdraw, or run. It's not that we're broken, it's that some part of us is terrified of being fully seen. Because what if we're seen and still not loved? That thought used to paralyze me. So I hid. I played roles. I showed the parts of myself I thought were lovable, the kind, the funny, the capable, and kept the messier parts tucked away, the insecure parts, the needy parts, the scared, jealous, chaotic ones. I believed deep down that if someone really saw those sides of me, they'd walk away. And ironically, by hiding those parts, I was the one walking away from myself. That self-rejection spilled into every connection I had. It's like I was building relationships on a foundation made of eggshells. One wrong move, one slip of the mask, and everything could crack. And when it inevitably did, I'd feel like I'd failed. But looking back, I see now, it wasn't failure. It was truth trying to find its way out. When we reject parts of ourselves, we project them onto others. We look for partners to carry what we're too afraid to hold. We idealize them, resent them, blame them, anything but face what's happening inside. I once dated someone who was painfully insecure. At first, I felt this urge to save them, like I could be their emotional anchor. It made me feel needed, important. But over time, I started resenting them. I felt trapped, drained, and then it hit me. I was drawn to their neediness because I was avoiding my own. Helping them gave me a distraction from the ache I didn't want to face, the part of me that longed for comfort, reassurance, someone to say, "You're enough, even when you're messy." But no one else can say that in a way that sticks unless you say it to yourself first. I know that's hard to hear. It was hard for me, too. I wanted so badly to be filled by someone else. I wanted to be chosen so I didn't have to choose myself. But every time I outsourced my wholeness, the relationship became a cycle of dependency, disappointment, and quiet despair. The turning point was this one moment. I was alone, heartbroken, confused. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and whispering to myself, "I don't want to abandon me anymore." It was such a small sentence, but it cracked something open. I began writing letters to the parts of me I'd hidden. The angry me, the anxious me, the needy, dramatic, impulsive me. I apologized for leaving them behind. I told them I was ready to listen, and in those conversations, raw, clumsy, honest, I started to feel something shift. Wholeness didn't come all at once. It's not like a movie where one revelation fixes everything. But I started noticing that I wasn't as triggered by others anymore. I could sit with my emotions without running. I could say, this is part of me instead of, this is wrong with me. It's wild how much energy we spend trying to be lovable, when all we really need is to love the parts of us we've convinced ourselves are unlovable. That's the paradox, isn't it? We seek deep connection, but it only becomes possible when we stop editing who we are. I'm still learning to do that, still catching myself in moments of self-rejection. But now, instead of spiraling into shame, I pause and ask, what part of me is asking to be seen right now? And usually, it's the same ones I've always tried to hide. So I try to listen, to welcome them back. Because every time I do, I become less afraid, less fragmented. And in that space, real love can grow, not the kind that demands perfection, but the kind that thrives in truth. That's the foundation I'm rebuilding now, not on eggshells, but on wholeness, on the courage to be all of me. And if someone walks away because of that, then they were never really holding me, just the mask I wore. But if someone stays, if someone loves the real me, shadows and all, then I know it's not a performance. It's connection, and that's worth everything. You ever wonder why we keep ending up in the same kinds of relationships? Different faces, different names, but the same emotional dance. It's like we're stuck in a loop. And I don't say that with judgment. I've lived it. I used to think I was just unlucky, that I kept attracting emotionally unavailable people, or people who made me feel small, or people I had to constantly prove my worth to. But at some point, something cracked through the story I kept telling myself, and I started asking a much harder question. Why do I keep choosing them? Not in a blaming way, but in a curious, compassionate way. Because behind every painful pattern, there's usually a younger version of us just trying to stay safe. I had to face the fact that I wasn't just the victim of my relationships. I was participating. I was recreating familiar dynamics because deep down they felt safe, even when they hurt. There's this idea I came across that really shook me. We confuse familiar with safe. If you grew up with inconsistent love, chaos, or emotional distance, then that becomes your emotional baseline. As painful as it is, it feels normal. So when someone comes along who is stable, consistent, and emotionally available, it might feel boring or even threatening. I remember dating someone who was kind, like really kind. They listened. They didn't play games. They showed up. And I panicked. I felt this strange urge to pull away. I made up reasons in my head. They're too nice. There's no spark. But underneath that noise was fear. I didn't know how to receive safe love because I hadn't practiced it. It took me a long time to admit that I was addicted to intensity. Not consciously, of course, but on some level I believed love was supposed to feel like longing, chaos, like trying to earn someone's attention. That's what I knew. And so I kept choosing people who mirrored those old wounds. There's something called repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate our early emotional experiences in adult relationships, hoping to finally master or fix them. But here's the catch. You can't heal what happened back then by repeating it now. Healing only starts when you stop reaching outward and start turning inward. When you stop asking, why do they always hurt me? And start asking, what am I still trying to resolve through them? That question cracked me open. I started looking at my relationships like mirrors, not because the other person was always right or perfect, far from it, but because every dynamic I entered revealed something deeper about myself. My craving for validation, it came from a younger me who never felt quite good enough. My fear of abandonment, it echoed the emotional inconsistency I grew up with. My need to control, a shield against vulnerability. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I realized my relationships weren't failures. They were feedback. They were pointing to the parts of me that were still aching, still scared, still longing to be seen. But instead of continuing to hand those parts over to other people, hoping they'd heal them for me, I started asking, what does this part of me actually need? Can I give that to myself first, before I go looking for it in someone else? It changed everything. I'm not saying I suddenly became relationship-proof. I still mess up. I still get triggered. But now I see the pattern sooner. I catch the story I'm telling myself before it runs the show. And that awareness, it's powerful. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between repeating the past and choosing the present. I also started doing this practice, kind of strange at first, but weirdly healing. I'd imagine the younger version of myself, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting beside me. I'd picture her face, her fears, her longing to be chosen, and I'd talk to her. I'd say things like, I see you, I know you're scared, but you don't have to keep proving your worth. I'm here, I've got you now. That inner dialogue softened something hard in me. It reminded me that so many of our adult choices are really just echoes of our childhood pain. We're not bad for repeating patterns. We're just human. We repeat until we remember who we are, and the moment we start choosing differently, not because it's easy or comfortable, but because we've outgrown the pain, is the moment we begin to step into freedom. You deserve relationships that don't feel like battles, that don't require you to shrink, chase, or constantly question your worth. But you can't build those relationships while rejecting the parts of you that need love the most. So start there, with the part of you that's still scared, still waiting. Let them know you're not abandoning them anymore. Because once you become a safe place for yourself, everything around you begins to shift. And the loops you used to live inside, they start to break. I want to tell you something I didn't know how to say for a long time. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not broken because you feel things deeply. I used to carry this silent shame for how easily I could cry, how quickly I'd get overwhelmed or triggered. I thought it made me weak, dramatic, like there was something fundamentally wrong with me. So I learned to keep it in. To be cool, calm, collected, to smile when I wanted to scream, to nod when I wanted to leave, to say I'm fine when my whole body was screaming otherwise. But here's the thing, repression isn't healing, it's hiding. And eventually, the parts we keep in the dark begin to sabotage everything we try to build in the light. I started noticing this pattern, how I'd pull away the moment things got real. I'd be doing okay, feeling connected, and then some comment would hit a nerve, something innocent, something small. And suddenly I was shutting down, spiraling, ready to run. It wasn't about the moment, it was about what it touched. See, we all have emotional landmines, wounds we carry from years ago that still ache like they happened yesterday. We think we've buried them. But then someone says the wrong thing or doesn't say anything at all, and boom, the pain comes rushing back. For me, it was the fear of being too needy, too much to handle. I remember being a kid, trying to explain why I felt scared or overwhelmed, and being told to toughen up, or that I was making a big deal out of nothing. So I stopped sharing. I stopped trusting that anyone could handle the real me, and the older I got, the better I became at performing, being the strong one, the understanding one, the one who never asks for too much. But that wasn't strength, it was survival. It took me years to realize that those intense reactions I had in relationships, the ones that made me feel crazy or ashamed, weren't signs of dysfunction. They were signals, messages from the younger parts of me that had been silenced for too long. That's when I began learning about emotional triggers, not as flaws to fix, but as flashlights pointing toward something tender and true. I started tracking them, noticing when I felt a disproportionate reaction to something seemingly small, like when someone canceled plans last minute and I spiraled into "they don't care about me," or when a partner didn't reply to a message for hours and I felt abandoned, or when a friend forgot something important and I told myself I was forgettable. Those stories weren't born in that moment. They were echoes from years ago. And instead of shaming myself for feeling them, I started getting curious. Where does this feeling really come from? What am I believing about myself right now? What does the younger me need to hear? It wasn't easy. This kind of reflection rarely is. But it changed everything, because once you name the wound, you can stop blaming the world for poking it. You can start tending to it instead. Sometimes I'd even speak out loud to myself, in a soft voice, the way I wish someone had spoken to me when I was younger. "I know this hurts. You're not overreacting. You're remembering." That kind of inner parenting is awkward at first, but it's powerful. It tells the nervous system, "We're safe now. We're not abandoned anymore. I'm here." And something beautiful happens when you begin responding to your pain with compassion instead of criticism. It starts to soften, to trust you, to stop screaming for attention in the form of anxiety or sabotage. Your emotions aren't trying to ruin your life. They're trying to reconnect you with the parts of yourself that still feel alone. So if you've been told you're too sensitive, too reactive, too emotional, I want you to know, you're not too anything. You're human. You were just never taught how to sit with the storm instead of fighting it. But you can learn. You can build a relationship with your emotional world that doesn't feel like a battlefield. You can become the one who stays, who listens, who doesn't flinch when the pain shows up. That's what healing is, not becoming someone who never feels, but someone who knows what to do when the feelings come. And the more you learn to stay with yourself in those moments, the less power those old wounds have. They stop driving the car. They stop choosing your partners, your reactions, your beliefs, because you're not running anymore. You're staying. And that's where real strength lives, not in being unshakable, but in being unafraid to feel. You don't have to keep abandoning the parts of you that hurt. You can sit beside them. You can say, "I see you, I'm not leaving." And in that presence, the healing begins. You know, for the longest time, I thought self-love was something you earned. Like if I accomplished enough, looked good enough, stayed positive enough, then I'd finally deserve to feel good about myself. But it doesn't work that way. Self-love isn't a reward, it's a relationship. And like any relationship, it needs care, consistency, and patience, especially when things get messy. There's this moment I remember so clearly, a night when everything had fallen apart. A fight with someone I loved, work falling through, anxiety louder than usual. I felt hollow, shaky, like I didn't belong in my own skin. And I caught myself spiraling into those old thoughts. "You're a failure. You're too emotional. You're the problem." But instead of disappearing into those thoughts like I usually did, I tried something different. I put my hand over my chest, something I used to think was silly, and said quietly, "I'm not going to abandon you right now." It was such a small act, but it cracked open a door, one I'd been slamming shut for years. I'd always thought self-love meant feeling good about yourself, but that night taught me something deeper. Real self-love shows up most when it's hard to love yourself, when you're not proud of how you acted, when you're exhausted and empty, when the critic in your head is screaming and you choose to whisper back, "I'm still here, I'm not leaving." That's the practice, not perfection, but presence. And presence isn't glamorous. It's not about spa days and mantras. though those can help. It's about the quiet decisions you make when no one's watching, like setting a boundary even when your voice shakes, like not replying to the text that would pull you back into a toxic pattern, like feeding your body even when you feel numb, like letting yourself rest when every part of you says you haven't earned it. It's these micro moments that build the foundation of self-love, not because they're easy, but because they say, I matter, even now, especially now. One of the hardest things I had to learn was how to stop abandoning myself in relationships. I'd disappear so easily, adapt, contort, shrink, just to keep the peace or keep the connection. I thought love meant being chosen, even if I lost myself in the process. But love without self is not love, it's sacrifice. And over time, that kind of sacrifice doesn't lead to closeness, it leads to resentment. So I started asking myself questions I'd never asked before. What does my body need right now? What boundary am I afraid to set? What am I pretending to be okay with just to be accepted? The answers weren't always convenient. Sometimes they led to uncomfortable choices. Stepping away from people, changing old habits, facing truths I didn't want to admit. But they also led me back to myself, piece by piece. And maybe that's what real self-love is. Not one grand, sweeping feeling, but 1,000 small acts of coming home to yourself. Some days I still forget. I fall back into old scripts. I criticize myself, compare, chase validation. But now there's a deeper part of me that notices, that steps in and says, hey, we've done this before. We don't have to go down that road again. That's the beauty of this work. You start to build a relationship with yourself that feels trustworthy. And when things fall apart, as they sometimes do, you don't collapse with them because you've got roots now. You've got you. So if no one's told you this lately, let me say it loud and clear. You don't have to earn your worth. You don't have to hustle for love. You don't have to be perfect to be held, especially by yourself. Self-love isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a practice you return to over and over, especially when it's hardest, especially when you feel like the least lovable version of yourself. That's when the practice matters most. And that's when it begins to change you. It's a strange thing, but once you begin healing, really healing, your taste in love starts to change. It's like your nervous system, so used to the adrenaline of chaos or the tension of being unseen, starts to crave peace. Not the passive kind, but a quiet, grounding kind of love that doesn't make you chase, question, or prove. I used to mistake intensity for intimacy. I thought butterflies meant something was real, that longing meant depth, that the ache in my chest when someone pulled away was just part of love's mystery. But in hindsight, I see now, most of those feelings were anxiety dressed up as romance. They were my old wounds calling out to be relived, not healed. You know what real love started to feel like once I got more honest with myself? Safe, still, spacious, not boring, not cold, just calm. I had to learn how to stop confusing drama with passion, because sometimes we're so used to emotional highs and lows that we don't know how to recognize stability. It feels foreign, suspicious, even a little bit dull. But that's not dullness, that's nervous system regulation. And it takes time to rewire for that. It takes time to recognize that love doesn't have to come with anxiety. I had a moment once with someone who truly cared for me, where I found myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to ghost or lash out or disappear like others had. But they didn't. They just kept showing up, and I almost sabotaged it, because a part of me still believed I wasn't worthy of that kind of steady love. I wasn't used to being accepted without earning it. I wasn't used to not having to fix or chase or decode someone. It was like my entire being had been trained for survival, not connection. But slowly, breath by breath, choice by choice, I began letting myself receive. Not just compliments or kindness, but the deeper things: consistency, presence, understanding. And the more I received, the more I saw how different attraction looks when you're not acting from emptiness, when you're full, not perfect, but whole in your own way. You stop being pulled toward people who echo your old pain. Instead, you start feeling drawn to those who resonate with your growth, your peace, your wholeness. You stop asking, will they love me? And you start asking, does this love honor who I am now? Because here's the thing, when you love from need, you bond through your wounds. When you love from wholeness, you bond through your values. There's a softness in that, a clarity, an ease. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're looking to walk beside someone, not to carry them, not to be carried, but to grow together. I know it's not always easy to get there. The old patterns are sticky. Sometimes they pull you back without warning. You find yourself craving the ones who don't see you, romanticizing the people who triggered your pain, thinking maybe this time it'll be different. But healing teaches you to pause, to breathe through the craving, to ask better questions, like, am I drawn to this person because I feel alive with them, or because I feel addicted to the emotional roller coaster? Do I feel safe or just familiar? Do I like who I become around them? These are the questions that saved me from going back to the same pain in prettier packaging, because attraction is not a mystery, it's a mirror. And when your reflection changes, when you see yourself with more compassion, more respect, more honesty, the mirror shifts too. You stop chasing intensity. You start choosing resonance. And suddenly, love doesn't feel like drowning or burning or begging. It feels like arriving, like breathing, like being held without having to perform. That's not boring, that's sacred, and you deserve that kind of love. But first, you have to believe it exists. And even more than that, you have to believe you're capable of holding it, of receiving it, of sustaining it. You are, more than you know. There's a beautiful kind of stillness that settles in when you stop chasing love and start embodying it. It doesn't mean you stop wanting connection or that you become indifferent to others. It just means you're no longer starving. You're no longer looking outside of yourself for something that was meant to live within you all along. I didn't always believe that. I used to think love was something you had to earn through beauty, charm, achievement, being the right kind of person. I thought if I could just get it right, someone would finally come along and fill that aching space inside me. But what I've learned, and keep learning, is this: you don't find love, you become it. Not in the performative Instagram quote way. I'm talking about real, grounded, embodied love. The kind that sits with your shame and doesn't flinch. The kind that doesn't abandon you when you're anxious, afraid, or messy. That love starts with how you treat yourself. Not just on good days, but especially on the days when you feel most unworthy of it. Because here's the secret no one tells you. The more you love yourself, the more you change what you're attracted to. And the more you love yourself, the more clearly you see who's actually capable of loving you back in the way you deserve. The desperation fades, the hunger quiets, and in its place comes clarity, not just about what you want, but what you're no longer willing to settle for. You stop falling for people who activate your trauma and start noticing the ones who honor your growth. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing, with intention, with depth, with discernment. You see, when you stop abandoning yourself, you naturally repel those who expect you to, and yeah, that can feel lonely at first. You might lose people. You might outgrow dynamics that once felt like home, even if that home was chaotic. But in that space, in that stillness, something else begins to rise, a sense of peace, a groundedness that says, I'm not for everyone, but I'm fully here for me. And that's where everything begins to shift. Because when you become the source of your own love, you're no longer chasing, proving, performing. You're radiating. And from that place, love doesn't have to be hunted. It finds you. Naturally, authentically, quietly, in ways that feel like alignment, not survival. You attract people who see you because you finally see yourself. You attract love that respects you because you've stopped tolerating what dishonors you. But even if no one else shows up, and sometimes for a while they won't, you're not empty. You're not waiting. You're living. And that's the kind of presence that turns your entire life into a reflection of love. Not just your relationships, but your work, your home, your decisions. Everything begins to mirror what you've claimed within. You were never broken. You were never too much. You were never unworthy. You were just disconnected from your own truth. And now you're remembering. Now you're returning. Not to who you were before the pain, but to who you were before the world told you to be someone else. That person, they've always been love, and now you finally remember how to come home to them.